saying I read an email. I opened up the next letter because the image of what the person said, like, so it was like a written thing. So they wrote something, and I thought it was going to happen right now. So it popped an image into her head. And so she's so deluded that she thinks it's happening between Trump's statements and the damages that went to her. Now, there was a 5-hour window between the time that the cut article from her was posted and the time when Trump issued his first denial. He doesn't even know about it. Media asked. I never heard about it. Plaintiff claims to have received at least 2 death threats on that same date, but she deleted those. Now, then she said that she did not recall what time the messages were sent to her, so we don't know if someone read the article and heard the news and sent them, or someone heard Trump and sent them, because we can't know, because she deleted the evidence. And since the messages have been deleted, this information is unknowable, so we have no idea. Now, critically, Alina says if the June 21st death threats had been issued during that 5-hour window before Trump even ever spoke about her, it would conclusively establish that they're not the cause of Trump. That would undercut any of her arguments. And since they say she was receiving similar messages in the immediate aftermath of the article, so it didn't come from Trump. In sum, it's clear from the testimony set forth above that Ms. Carroll sought to circumvent the rules of procedure. She not only failed to preserve her evidence, but instead knowingly deleted the messages that contain the threats. This is a procedural irregularity that is not only appropriate for the court to grant a mistrial, but it's actually essential. Her failure to preserve this evidence in contravention of the rules severely prejudices Trump and his defense, as he's been deprived of critical information necessary for his defense. And so we ask that you declare a mistrial.
Dick and Dana, E.G. and Carroll's lawyers argued today the only thing Donald Trump cares about is money, and thus the only way to get him to stop defaming Carroll is a big penalty. Well, that is what they got today. Carroll walked out of the courthouse smiling about an hour and a half ago. This includes $18 million in compensatory damages. That's money the jury felt Carroll was owed due to lost wages and reputational damage.
Lying piece of shit.
$65 million in punitive damages, essentially a
fuck that lying ass cunt.
Judge Kaplan repeatedly reminded jurors that Trump was already found liable for sexually abusing and defaming Carroll, and that their task today was to determine what amount, if any, he should pay.
So proud to stand with President Trump, but I am not proud to stand with what I saw in that courtroom. We will immediately appeal. We will set aside that ridiculous jury. And I just want to remind you all of one thing. I will continue with President Trump to fight for everybody's First Amendment right to speak.
Defamation damages trial against Donald Trump. Trump walked into the courtroom late. He walked out when the plaintiffs were delivering their closing arguments. At one point, the judge had to warn defense lawyers they were close to being thrown in the lockup. Let's get right to CNN's Kara Skinell, who ran out from inside that courtroom to give us an explanation of what was going on. Kara, what have you been seeing?
Yeah, John, an eventful day this morning, to say the least, that had nothing to do with even the closing arguments. So it began, as you say, when Donald Trump's team was already late, which the judge noted when he took the bench. Then Donald Trump did enter the courtroom, and they were arguing still, before the jury even got in there, about a slide that the Trump's team wanted to use in their presentation. And Carroll's lawyers said it included things that were not in evidence in the case. The judge said it was out. That's when Trump's attorney, Aliba Hama, stood up to challenge the judge on his ruling. He's made it very clear throughout this trial, when he rules, and that's it. She started to challenge him. He had hit his limit and said, you are on the verge of spending some time in the lockup. Now sit down. Now, then at this point, we were moving into closing arguments. The jury was brought in, and Carroll's team started their statements by telling the jury, what this case was about, these statements that Donald Trump had made. And Carroll's attorney, Roberta Kaplan, was specifically saying at this moment that Trump didn't respect the jury verdict last year
In the polls, and now we see what you get in New York. So don't get it twisted, whoever asked me that question. I am so proud to stand with President Trump. But I am not proud to stand with what I saw in that courtroom. I'm not finished. Let me just finish and I'll take questions, please. Before I walked into court, that judge decided that every single defense President Trump had, we were not allowed to raise in front of the jury. It is in writing, and I encourage the journalist, the real journalist, to take the minute to look at his orders. There was no proof. And I couldn't prove that she didn't bring in the dress. There was no DNA. There was no expert. My experts were denied. Two of them were denied to come in. They didn't let me bring up that Reed Hoffman funded Miss Kaplan. And you know what we got in there? And that is disgusting. That is a violation of everything I stand.
Look behind the public curtain because there are some details around that entire saga that no one else wants to talk about. One name around the E. Jean Carroll assault case around Trump that is really hard to explain. He's one of the biggest political donors to the Democratic Party and a vocal supporter of Nikki Haley for president. But that's not all. His name? Ried Hoffman. To many people in the tech space, that name might ring a bell because he's the founder of LinkedIn as well as a major early investor in startups like PayPal and OpenAI.
Ried Hoffman funded Miss Kaplan. Bring up that Ried Hoffman funded Miss Kaplan. Let me bring up that Ried Hoffman funded Miss Kaplan.
To many people in the tech space, that name might ring a bell because he's the founder of LinkedIn as well as a major early investor in startups like PayPal and OpenAI. And this is the seemingly unrelated individual that for some reason is funding the entire legal case of E. Jean Carroll against Donald Trump. Again, we're not drawing any conclusions on the case. This is all alleged. We're just asking questions. Hoffman, who's the 24th largest donor to the Democratic Party, with over $14 million worth of donations in 2021, decide to fund an entirely unrelated abuse case. But there's more details now coming out after the Epstein documents release, because he's been confirmed as one of the many people to have visited the island. Hey, Ried Hoffman is becoming an increasingly important character to understanding what is truly going on with the E. Jean Carroll case. Let's get into this.
Republicans or conservatives, but from committed Democratic partisans. Anti-civilization activist Ried Hoffman, for example, is a major Haley supporter. Ried Hoffman is the founder of LinkedIn. He's a friend of Jeffrey Epstein's. He was a visitor to Pedo Island, in fact. He's also the guy who funded E. Jean Carroll's sexual assault case against Donald Trump. Ried Hoffman is a Democratic mega donor. In 2020, he gave $1 million to David Brock's American Bridge PAC. That's approximately the same team. So you know exactly who he is.
Why is it then that a character like this would be so in on the idea of backing Nikki Haley as a lever to bring down Donald Trump? And even more so, why would someone like Ried Hoffman splurge his own money to fund such a sensitive case, despite this? And all we heard in response was an incoherent word salad and not really much of an answer.
My team looked at it and thought that it was her voice should be heard.
He looks like a
because
fucking
she was
pedophile.
challenging someone who was so much more wealthy and powerful, it shouldn't be squashed. And that, providing that voice for, people who are otherwise would be ground down by the system or the powerful is, I think, a good thing. Obviously, especially in the case of women, and obviously, especially in the case of sexual and other, torture and attack so providing that support was something that I felt very happy to do.
I don't know about instead of a wealthy woman bringing forward 30-year-old allegations against a former president. But it's almost before you even find an answer to this question that some other things start to pop up. This is a case that has chased Trump for almost 5 years, either in the form of direct assault allegations or in the multiple back and forth defamation lawsuits afterwards. But the first time that they actually came forward, that happened back in 2019 when E. Jean Carroll launched a new book out of nowhere titled "What Do We Need Men For?", where she rode the wave of the #MeToo movement to bring those serious allegations against Donald Trump. If there's anything you can gauge from this fact, ask yourself why such allegations would be teased before a book launch instead of actually taking them to court first. It's a kind of sensationalization of this case that ultimately led it nowhere. So far for Donald Trump, the process has been the punishment. Taking each other to court over defamation instead. And guess what? Judging from the latest developments, Donald Trump might even be forced to pay her an additional $10 million in damages. Trump, on the other hand, he's not only completely denied the allegations, but also said that he had no idea who E. Jean even was before these allegations were brought forward. You can make of that what you will.
A person I never knew, I never had anything to do with. It's a totally rigged deal. This whole thing is rigged, election interference. But this is a person I have no idea, until this happened, obviously, I have no idea who she was. and nor could I care less. It's a rigged deal. It's a made-up, fabricated story. Well, they found out today that she got rid of a lot of evidence, as you probably noticed. She got rid of massive amounts of evidence.
And by the way, who can forget the incredible yet uncomfortable moment that we saw back in 2019 when E. Jean Carroll gave one of the most bizarre interviews to CNN's Anderson Cooper on the topic of the allegations? E. Jean struggled to describe the alleged incident, and then fangirled over hanging out with Anderson. This is the few short seconds that were cut from the original clip posted by CNN, which goes to show just how interested the network is in giving you the full story. Just watch this uneasy moment for yourself that left Anderson Cooper frantically trying to go for a commercial break after she potentially put the entire case in jeopardy from her side.
You don't feel like a victim?
I was not thrown on the ground and ravished, which the word carries so many sexual connotations. This was not sexual. It hurt.
But I think most people think it is a violent assault. It is not.
I think most people think of as being sexy. Fantasies.
We're going to take a quick break. If you can stick around, we'll talk more on the other side.
You're fascinating to talk.